Story of Jinbei. So Jinbei was a fishman who grew up on Fishman Island, like all the other fishmen, right? He was so cool that he became, part of the king's guard eventually. He guarded over King Neptune, you know, the monarch of Fishman Island. He had a friend named Fisher Tiger. Fisher Tiger was an inventor or a pirate in the regular people's world, but they saw him as an adventurer and a guy who liked to explore the world. He come back and he said, the world out there, was all right, but then it was also not because there were slaves and our people were being enslaved, and the shit that I don't like, it makes me feel fucking sick. That like we have our people up there, enslaved and other things, but he was able to free some of them. You know, and these freed slaves became a part of his crew. Um, that being, the Sun Pirates, ruled by Fisher Tiger. He saved all kind of slaves, you know, from bondage, including Bo Hancock too. Not just, fishermen, but other people too. And then Arlong was there. Arlong was a guy who, didn't like humans at all. Fisher Tiger and, Jinbei would let situations, tell things, right? So if a human child shows up and they're like, homeless or forgotten about, you know, they ain't gonna kill the kid, or Arlong would. See, they were a part of the Fishman Pirates. They're not the Fishman Pirates, my bad. The Sun Pirates, I'm fucked up. And the Sun Pirates, they were running with Fisher Tiger, He left Fishman Island to become a pirate with them. And then that happened, right? And they met a girl named Koala, and Arlong was like, we should kill that guy. She don't need to be here. That's a human. And they're like, no, this girl's all right. You gotta chill the fuck out and calm the fuck down, little bitch. It's okay, and we'll drop her off at her place, and it'll be fine. You know, and Mr. Tiger was like, yeah, that's cool enough. She ended up, being, saved by them. She went back to her people. She was like, that guy's cool. However, the people didn't receive it right. They're like, oh my God, that's a fish man. Call the government real quick. There's a monster. Then he got shot and other things. Fisher Tiger died. Then, Jinbei became the leader of them. And they became known as the Fishman Pirates. And also, he got a call from the world government to become one of the seven warlords of the sea, and he took the offer because he thought that it would keep them off of the fishman's dick, so they would be less slave catchers going after fishmen and other things, because Jinbei is a warlord and he calls to doing what the government says to an extent, because they're still pirates, right? They have immunity so that the Marines won't be able to fuck with them. They can't fuck with them. But that happened, and Jinbei was, running around for a while. And then, uh, Arlong gets caught by the Marines. For some reason, I don't know why, but Jinbei freed Arlong from, Impel Down, which is, authority as one of the seven warlords. and he was like, never come back. He beat him up, and then Arlong left, and then shit at Kokiyashi Village happened, and Nami had a sad backstory because of Jinbei's decision to let Arlong live a free life, but Jinbei continued to be a warlord, and one day he met a guy named Ace, Fire Fist Ace. This guy was a rambunctious young pirate. He had the flame fruit, and they fought for 10 days straight, both of them. He was like, I should have you beat, but you're still, fighting. That shit's ridiculous. They fought against one another, and eventually he also met, Whitebeard, and he found out that Whitebeard is one of these guys who's like, one of the four emperors, but he's not what, the government makes him out to be and other things. He's actually kind of a cool guy. Like, anytime he, like, stole money, he gave back to his hometown village. You know, he gave the money back to them so they could, like, live a good life. And he protected them with his flag as a Whitebeard. They were like, okay, this guy is not all bad. And he actually, like, has a crew full of sons. They like his family. So Jinbei respected that. But after some time, Jinbei eventually, he lost his warlord status. Because of that, I think, he calls to, siding with, pirates, to a degree. And they're like, you're not doing what we want, you're doing other things. And he's like, well, damn. And then he got imprisoned and impaled down. And then eventually, Luffy goes to impel down to save Ace. And he sees it, and Jinbei's there with Ace, and he's like, damn, if I could, prevent this war from happening, I would. I don't want to see this shit happen. It doesn't need to happen, and you shouldn't be executed. But Ace was like, he kind of had a huge mindset. He was like, man, if I die, then I do. It's sad, but, that's what has to happen. And he's like, this shit sucks. Luffy comes, and he's like, I can help you save your brother. I know Ace. I'll help you out. Get me out of the exchange real quick. And then when he got out of exchange, he started using fishman karate on all of these, people. These are prison guards and shit that impelled down. You know, he allowed Luffy to fight against Hannibal because Hannibal was finding Luffy's dick too hard. He witnessed that and he was like, okay, cool. But then Blackbeard showed up. He's like, teach. Yeah. Luffy was upset because he found out that fucking Blackbeard is the reason why Ace is getting executed. Basically, he caught Ace and became a warlord because he was able to catch him and other things. And then, Luffy, out of a fit of rage, started to attack Blackbeard. Then Jinbei was like, no, you can't do that shit because guess what? Your brother's still alive and he's moving forward, but he might not be alive much longer if we can't get there to prevent, a war from possibly breaking out or, your brother from dying. And he's like, all right, well, let's go then. And Jinbei was kind of there to keep Luffy, on course for his goal of saving his brother. So then they steal a ship and they leave. They get to Marineford and Jinbei's fighting against people. He fights against Gecko Moria, a weak ass Gecko Moria. He made easy work of Gecko Moria. Like everybody was like, "Oh my God, my shadow," And then he thought he was gonna get stronger, and then Jinbei hit him with water. Has salt in it, so the salt, allows the shadow to escape. And he basically, beat up Gecko Moria. bodied him, got him the fuck out of the way, and he was able to throw Luffy over the wall. He was like, "Go save your brother real quick." He was like, he threw him over the wall. But then the admirals were standing right in front of Luffy, and Luffy, oh my god, Luffy was standing in front of the admirals and shit. Like, I have to save my brother. I don't give a fuck that you guys are like the best or whatever. You stay the fuck out of my way. You know, and that's what he did. That's what he did. Jinbei was fighting against the Marines and other shit. Eventually, Luffy was able to get Ace freed, and they were fighting against Marines too. Then tragedy struck when Ace ended up with a hole in his chest and he died. Luffy passed out because of the shock and other things. He couldn't believe what he fucking saw with his own eye. And then they were like, protect that brat, is what Whitebeard said. Jinbei was like, I'll protect you with my life, Jinbei said. And he still, like, he took on magma from Akahinu. He put both his hands up and he was like, it's assumed that he put up Haki too, because he would have had to, against Akahinu to hold his fist back, because he's a fisherman, he's gonna fry it. And then he was like, we have to get Luffy out of here. He's the future and everything else. They grabbed him, and they started moving. Akahinu was running down Jinbei's dick, and then, Crocodile saved him, cut Akahinu in half and then threw him, sent Luffy, to, lost shit, basically. They were like, okay, get him on board, Trafalgar Law took him, and they got away. Jinbei was there for Luffy. Luffy was, he found out his brother was dead. And then he found out that, and he was like crying and upset. He knew he was weak and other things, but then Jinbei was like, get your shit together. Don't you still have something to live for? Don't you? And Luffy was like, I still have my crew. And he remembered all his crew members. And Jinbei was like, yes, so don't give up. Ace wouldn't want you to give up. You have to keep going and, become the king of the pirates like you want. That'll make, Ace smile and be happy. Proud that he was your brother. And he was like, yeah, I can't, not do it. And he did. Um, so Luffy trained for, 2 years. And Jinbei, went to Fisherman Island to, keep shit cool. Then Luffy comes back from the 2 year time skip, much more powerful and other things. And he goes to Fisherman Island, and then on Fisherman Island, Jinbei's down there. They meet Jinbei, and Jinbei tells, Nami the story about, how he was a part of, the Sun Pirates, and how, you know, uh, Horty Jones became kind of like Arlong, and that he hates humans, but like to a great degree, and anybody who like would side with the humans on any type of matters. And that's why, he was going to take over, or Horty Jones was going to take over and try to, rule over Fisherman Island, like as a dictatorship, and then go to the human world and, run shit there, is what the plan was. But, they fooled his plan. Um, and that's the thing, I don't know, Jinbei could have beat Horty Jones, in my opinion, but, he was doing other stuff. And Jinbei was fighting against the other fishermen who were on the New York Fishermen Pirates. And fuck. He's doing that. Luffy fought against Horty Jones, but he had a lot of blood loss. So then Jinbei had to, do a blood transplant because their, blood was like similar, same type of blood, like B type blood or H. I don't know. but they had the same type of blood type. Gave it to Luffy, and then Jinbei was like, I'll stay here and other things. Big Mom is the person who like rules over this territory now. And then Luffy said some things to Big Mom that was like, got her angry. Basically saying that, Fisherman Island's not her flag no more. They calls to him, because they like Luffy. They don't like her. And he was like, damn, he probably shouldn't have said that to Big Mom. But then they left, and then Jinbei, was doing his own thing. But then when Jinbei's seen again, he's like seen going up to Big Mom saying, I appreciate you for what you've done and other things for Fishman Island, having it as your territory or whatever. But guess what? We don't he calls to you no more, bitch. That's what he said, basically. He said it respectfully, of course, because it's Jinbei. Jinbei don't, do that shit. He was like, he bowed his head and he told her, that. And then he was like, but my new captain's Luffy. And I'm, going to see with him, see what he has to do. Because he has the will of D. That's that boy and stuff. She said, what? She got upset. She got really, pissed off. She was like, I'll steal your license, boy. And he was like, he wasn't scared of Big Mom. And he got away. And then he, freed Luffy too. Because they had caught Luffy on the island of, Whole Cake Island. And he said, cool. I had to save my nigga and stuff. That's a man that's going to be king of the forest. And he's like, all right. And, he got in there and they were sealed inside of a book. Um, and Jinbei got in there. He took care of the Big Mom. Her kids that were in there trying to like keep Luffy and Nami in bondage inside of this book. And then he got them out of the book, and they were like, Jinbei, you come to save us. And he's like, yes, and also join your crew. And they were there. And then like when the fleet of Big Mom pirate ships were trying to chase them off the island, um, or get them and destroy them before they could leave the island. Jinbei and the fisherman pirates showed up, and he was like, "Okay," they're like, "Okay, Captain, you want us to like sink these ships?" And he was like, "Yeah, we gotta help, try Hat Luffy escape." Luffy was like, "Are you sure you want to stay and fight with the fisherman?" And he's like, "Yes." And then Luffy's like, "Don't die. You meet me in the land of Wano." And he was like, "Okay." And he started, fucking shit up for the Big Mom pirates. Then later on, he shows up again, and he's there at the rate of Onigashima. He's like, "Hey, Luffy, I showed up." And he's like, "You're officially the helmsman of the Straw Hat Pirates." And he's like, "Cool." And he's there, and he's fighting, and he has the disguise on with Nico Robin, and they running around Onigashima, and he finds who's who. See, who's who was the guy who knew about the Sun God Nika fruit. He used to heat cars to the government, and he used to guard the Nika fruit. And they were talking about it as they were fighting. Jinbei was like not really on the back foot at all. And who's who had the ancient stone type of the saber-toothed tiger. Hitting off Fishman Nijutsu. Fishman 10,000 50,000 brick fist. Hitting him with Rio Hockey and really fucking his ass up is what Jinbei did. He let loose on that cat. It was a decent fight for Jinbei. Personally, I would like to see him go against somebody a little bit stronger, like maybe even Jack. but Who's Who was all right, and they defeated him, and then he was helping out everybody, escape from the fire. Only Gashima. Luffy defeated Kaido, and he was cool. He got his bounty, and it was 1.1 billion, like literally 1.1 billion. Sandy caught wind of it and said, "What? I'm 1.01 million, and Zero's 1.11 million." So all three of them have like bounties at 1 million, but Sanji is less than Jinbei, so Jinbei was like, "Huh, that's cool." But it makes sense because Jinbei used to be one of the seven warlords of the sea, so they give him a little bit of extra. Then they get to Fishman Island, or not Fishman Island, my bad, Egghead Island. Yeah, my bad. And then there's a Jinbei Seraphim there, and he's swimming around. But he's not really swimming around, he's using the swim fruit. And he has Lemurian blood, and because it's a Seraphim, created by Vegapunk. I thought it was Jinbei at first, but who was a Seraphim. And he's there to protect Vegapunk, get him off the island before, things happen. But that's where the life of Jinbei, doesn't end, but it still has to be told. There's still more to be told with the Straw Hats. But he's the newest member of the Straw Hat Pirates. Will Luffy have any more crew members? Who knows? Maybe not. If not, it's still alright. Because few sometimes is better than having a lot. I don't have any crew members yet, but I have you guys. You guys are like Grand Fleet members. So stay cool, calling on the corner, because I'll keep plugging these videos out for y'all. And that was the story of Jinbei.